Well, hello everyone, and welcome to part 3 of the Nemours Children's Health Early Care and Education Resource Showcase. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we are really looking forward to sharing with you about nourishing healthy eaters and some family engagement resources, including the Better Together Family Cafés. I am Kalisti Chong, a manager at Nemours Children's National Office of Policy and Prevention, and our ECE team focuses on creating healthy early care and education program policies, practices, and environments at both the state systems level and the facility level in states across the nation. This is the third and final resource showcase that we're offering at this time, and the recording of today's session will be posted on our healthykidshealthyfuture.org website. We will also email out the recording of this session and the 2 previous sessions that have taken place over the last 2 months over the next couple of days. I know that a lot of people register for today's session, but are on spring break, so we're gonna be sure to send out that recording. So during today's presentation, we'll ask for everyone to keep themselves muted. Please feel free to utilize the chat box and share any thoughts or questions that you might have there. We certainly welcome any questions that you might have, and we're going to do our very best to address all the questions throughout the presentation, and we have some time at the end as well. If we're unable to answer all the questions, we'll reach out to you individually to provide any requested information. Also, the feedback survey at the end is a really great way to share any additional questions you might have with us. So today, during our session, we're going to focus on sharing about nourishing healthy eaters, the Better Together Family Cafés resources, and we're going to review how the materials can be accessed, and then we're going to share some ideas for utilizing the materials as well. And hopefully we'll have time for questions. So at first we have Nourishing Healthy Eaters, and it's really an honor to introduce Rebecca Duchette, my very insightful and thoughtful colleague here at Nemours. So Rebecca, please take it away.
Thanks, Kalisti. Good to see everybody that's joining us today, and a happy week of the young child to everybody. And thanks for all you do to help our children grow up healthy. So I'm really excited to share a little bit with you about the Nourishing Healthy Eaters project. Nourishing Healthy Eaters is an out-of-the-box series of trainings. The content is really geared toward helping ECE professionals support children in their journey to become healthy eaters. Next slide, please. So here's a little bit about the background of Nourishing Healthy Eaters. This project was a partnership with Plum Organic Social Mission Program. We worked closely with them around funding for this project. They were really a gracious partner in terms of the training content and left all of that up to us, which was just lovely. The goals of the project were to advance nutrition training opportunities for early care and education professionals. One thing that really speaks to me about Nourishing Healthy Eaters is that it is not centered around CACFP. And while we really recognize the important role CACFP plays in ensuring children get nutrition and optimal nutrition, we know that many programs do not participate on the food program. And in many states, the bulk of training around child nutrition is centered around CACFP. So this suite of materials is applicable to both sets of programs, those participating and those not participating. A second goal of the project is really to, Felicia, can you go back one? I'm sorry. There we go, thank you. Support state partners to engage their training and technical assistance networks, to really support those networks in nutrition trainings, as we know that in nutrition is a specialty, if you will, training, and not all trainers may have a background in child nutrition. So to really give them a suite of materials that give them everything they need to provide a training. And then lastly is around enhancing family engagement opportunities focused on healthy eating and helping providers connect with families around challenges to healthy eating. So Nourishing Healthy Eaters training modules consist of 3 workshops. The first one is an introductory workshop that really encourages the adults providers to think about their own relationship with food and their food journey. We talk about adult wellness and the relationship of nutrition to wellness. Excuse me. We do an activity where we think about our food journey. We spend some time on mindful eating practices and what that looks like. There's a piece of the content that takes providers through the nutrition labels and reading ingredients lists as well. The second half of the workshop focuses on the importance of healthy eating for young children and how nutrition links to all developmental domains. These 3 workshops could be delivered standalone or independently. The second 2 workshops have similar objectives in each one. One session is geared for providers of infants and toddlers, and the third session for providers that are working with preschoolers. Each of these sessions looks at the developmental stages of becoming an eater and the common challenges, such as picky eating, food jags, and talks about some strategies to overcome those challenges. We talk about the role and practices that ECE providers can have in place to really support children to become healthy eaters, family engagement opportunities. And then the last piece is really around that action planning and to identify a nutrition best practice that our participants would like to incorporate into their daily routines with children. Each of these workshops is approximately 2 hours in length and is really focused on transfer of training back into the workplace. So really identifying things that we want to incorporate into our own work every day with children. The next slide captures the images of some of the materials that we've developed. We have an implementation guide, the purple document in the middle there, that contains each of the 3 presentation decks with speaker notes and suggestions. Each of the 3 sessions has a handout packet that goes along with it. We also have an accompanying guide that we have updated with this work, the best practices for healthy eating you see on the right. And this is just a really rich document that contains a bunch of information about healthy eating practices, some materials for families, for teachers, and classrooms, and some great images of healthy meals. Both of these materials are available in English and in Spanish. So Nourishing Healthy Eaters has been piloted in 3 states. We started in New York State with work with New York Department of Health and their SPAN master trainers. And New York was very supportive and helpful in creating the content. We moved down to New Jersey for our second training, and trainings there were across multiple training and technical assistance agencies, including CCR&Rs, Child Care Health Consultants, and the Infant Toddler Network. We did 2 cohorts in Texas in partnership with Texas AEYC. And then we went back to New York to work with the community, creating Healthy Schools and Communities project in New York State, and there are 25 grantees that have been trained on the Nourishing Healthy Eaters curriculum. And most recently in Missouri, we partnered with the Child Care Health Consultation Network to bring the Nourishing Healthy Eaters trainings to all consultants in Missouri. So to date, we have 173 trainers that have completed the Train the Trainer and are working with the materials in their communities. So mention that these materials are available on our website, and you can see an image of the trainers page off the healthykidshealthyfuture.org website where our resources are located. There are, on the far left, there is in red where the resources tab is, and if you can advance, Felicity, you'll see right there, you'll type in your name and submit, and this resources tab will come up. And if you click on the resources tab next, then you'll get an image with each of the different documents. So you can see there you have the PowerPoint presentation and then the handout packet for each of the 3 presentation decks. And then lastly, the implementation guide. 2 of these modules have been created into online modules. We partnered with Quorum Learning, which is now owned by Teaching Strategies. This Quorum is an online PD membership platform for early educators. Several states have subscriptions, statewide subscriptions that allow all ECE providers in that state to obtain continuing educations or clock hours that count toward licensure. Many programs also have individual licenses to their site. They worked with us to complete these 2 NHE modules. They're found both on their website as well as the Healthy Kids, Healthy Future website. They're 90-minute interactive modules that contain self-assessment, videos, reflective activities, and at the end of each session, participants can that complete the sessions can print a certificate. So those are a really rich resource for providers and can be used in conjunctions with the face-to-face trainings as well. So most recently, with our 3rd year of funding from Plum Organics, we worked around a conversation kit that would support childcare professionals in facilitating conversations on 3 eating challenges providers and families face in helping children become healthy eaters. So picky eating, healthy snacks, and healthy celebrations. The conversation kit includes videos, discussion prompts, and resources, handouts with extension ideas to keep a conversation around these topics going. We thought we'd share with you today one of the videos, and this one is the picky eating one. These are short 60-second snips.
If your child is a picky eater, you are not alone. Picky eating is common in early childhood. The good news is that most children can learn to enjoy new foods. Start with patience over pressure. When children's food choices are respected, it helps build their autonomy and trust. When adults model how and what to eat, children will be more likely to make positive eating choices. Develop a consistent schedule for meals and snacks so that children know what to expect and can manage their hunger. And when possible, make your meals a social occasion by eating together as a family and letting children serve themselves. Focus on the fun of being together rather than the food. These are just a few tips to support your food journey. To learn more, visit healthykidshealthyfuture.org.
So again, there's 3 separate videos that can be used in conjunction with some supporting materials to help, again, that tough conversations that both providers and families face around healthy eating.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Does anyone have any questions for Rebecca? You can either add them into the chat or you can unmute and share now before we hop on to the Better Together Family Cafes. All right. Well, thank you again, Rebecca, for sharing about Nourishing Healthy Eaters and all of the amazing resources that you have available for Nourishing Healthy Eaters. And I'm sorry, I forgot that you have this last slide. Please go ahead.
Thanks. So we did pull together a few suggested uses for the tool. As I mentioned, it could be integrated into training and technical assistance agencies, maybe even those that don't do a lot around nutrition. This might be a first step into supporting providers around some of these more challenging topics. It could also be useful to be really targeted at ECE programs that are requesting nutrition trainings, but they're not on the CACFP. Again, you know, there's a lot of training typically in states through the CACFP agency and sponsor organizations to support them in meeting the meal pattern guidelines, but our non-participating programs don't have access to those materials in many states. We could connect the trainings to nutrition recognition programs if your state has a recognition program. Those online modules, the two that are available, the intro session and the preschool session, just to raise awareness of those to directors and administrators as a way to support their providers in supporting kids around healthy nutrition. And then lastly, to promote the training and family conversation resource with childcare health or nurse consultation networks. And many times those folks also work around family engagement with programs. So some considerations as we worked with states with these trainings, the 4 pilot states working them the trainings to get the trainings into their PD registry for clock hour PD credits. And just can support you in that process and any of the indicators that you might need. And then thinking about how we can support training and technical assistant agencies. What do they need to learn about the NHE sessions, and how can we support them in delivering the trainings? Especially around currency training. I think that's one thing, we do an intro and train the trainer, but how do we keep them updated on the most current information and keep them motivated to deliver these trainings? And lastly, the conversation kit resource could align with other family engagement efforts underway in your state. And just to, again, many times those family engagement efforts focus on the protective factors, which is amazing and awesome, but we can incorporate healthy eating and physical activity into that and align with those protective factors as well. Thanks, Khaleesi.
Thank you, Rebecca. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Better Together family cafes. So before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to invite Jamie Ward to introduce herself and to share a bit about the amazing work that her organization, Curricula Concepts, does in Arkansas, and she's going to be presenting with me today. So Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Khaleesi. As Khaleesi said, I, excuse me, am in Arkansas. I'm with Curricula Concepts, and I've been in early care and education for over 25 years now. The past 10 years really focused on family engagement and health and wellness of young children, their families, and the ECE workforce. So we have a team here in Arkansas of about 15 who work across the state as well as across state lines and other places to provide training and technical assistance, coaching, and so on with both families and our workforce. So I am excited to be here and tell you more about our experience with cafes and specifically as they relate to the work of Better Together.
Thanks, Jamie. And Jamie was the primary state lead in Arkansas for the Better Together project. And I can say that it was truly a joy getting to know and to work with the Arkansas team on Better Together. Just to share a little bit about Better Together, was a 3-year project that started in 2019. It was implemented in 4 states, and those states included Arizona, Arkansas, Indiana, and Mississippi. There were several components to the project, including the Better Together learning collaboratives for early care and education programs that focused on nutrition and physical activity topics. And if you'd like to learn more about the Better Together learning collaboratives, you can go back and watch the first resource showcase that we hosted in February. You can find the link to that recording in any of our resource showcase emails or on the Healthy Kids, Healthy Future website. We hosted that webinar alongside our partners at Go Knapsack at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So through Better Together, one of the components was an innovation project. So we were asked by the funder to implement an innovation project. A wide range of ideas were discussed and researched, and finally the team decided to go with enhancing the Better Together model to really promote positive experience-based approaches and practices in early care and education settings, and also to strengthen the program and family relationship around nutrition and physical activity topics, which the intervention and approach that we decided to implement was family cafes. To give you just a little bit more information about the background, we worked together with several partners to develop and pilot the family cafes. First of all, of course, we have Curricula Concepts. So Nemours contracted with Curricula Concepts as the lead for this part of the Better Together project, and their staff developed and piloted the family cafes. We also partnered with the HOPE National Resource Center at Tufts Medical Center. And as HOPE stands for Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences, the Tufts HOPE team helped to incorporate a focus on positive experiences into the framework of both the family cafes and the learning collaboratives that were being implemented in Arkansas. The HOPE team spent time training the team on HOPE building blocks and providing feedback on the materials that Curricula Concept developed. We also partnered with the Go Knapsack team at UNC Chapel Hill to lead the evaluation and to provide feedback on the resources as they were being developed. Curricula Concepts had a history of offering family cafes, as we just heard from Jamie, and staff had already completed training on the Caring Conversations cafe model. So they were really primed and ready to go to work on this type of project. And they took the lead on creating all of the family cafe materials and PowerPoints. So the family cafes were piloted from 2021 to 2022. And early care and education programs participating in the Better Together learning collaboratives were recruited to take part in this pilot to help better engage their families. So as the ECE programs were participating in the learning collaboratives, the program staff were learning about nutrition and physical activity topics and making healthy changes at the program level. And then through the family cafes, the ECE programs were engaging families in conversations about the same topics to really help impact healthy changes at home. So combining the family cafe model with sharing content on nutrition and physical activity topics was a really great way for families to share that information that they were learning in the learning collaboratives and to facilitate meaningful conversation with those families. And we believe that it is really powerful, and we've saw the power of the family cafes when the ECE programs and the families are on the same page about nurturing the healthy growth and development of the children that were in their programs. So Jamie is going to share a little bit more about the pilot and the outcomes of the pilot momentarily. And now we're going to take a look at the family cafe approach. To help share what a family cafe is and how it can be used as a tool to encourage conversations with families around health and wellness topics, we worked with the same animator that Rebecca did to develop a short video about family cafes. This video can be used by project coordinators or cafe facilitators to recruit participants for the family cafes, or they can even be used with community partners can actually use these videos to help to recruit anyone that might be interested in facilitating the family cafes.
When it comes to our children's health and wellness, connection matters. Meaningful conversations within a caring community can provide families with tools and support to help them nurture their children's healthy growth and development. Whether online or in person, family cafes create opportunities for families to get to know their child care providers, community partners, healthcare resources, and each other. In a safe and friendly setting, families explore a variety of topics to increase their understanding of the health and wellness needs of young children. Families access information on local services and resources that might be helpful to them. Cafes bring families together to celebrate milestones and successes, increasing motivation to continue on the journey towards health. Creating a welcoming and distraction-free environment during cafes makes it possible for families to fully engage in conversation. Families also develop a sense of belonging and social connection through sharing their experiences and encouraging one another. Family cafes, connecting families and communities to create the healthiest generation of children. To learn more about family cafes and other nutrition and physical activity resources, visit healthykidshealthyfuture.org.
Hope that you enjoyed that short video. I really enjoy and love the videos that we were able to develop with the animator for Better Together and for Nourishing Healthy Eaters. So to share a little bit more about family cafes, just as we saw through the short video, the purpose of the Better Together family cafes is really to engage families and caregivers of young children in meaningful and intentional conversations around nutrition and physical activity topics. So they can be used in a variety of ways. ECE programs can use these cafe materials themselves to engage with families that they serve. And then also any community organizations can implement the cafes in collaboration with an ECE program to engage the families. Or any community organizations can also use the materials to support families in their area independently, and so not in partnership with an ECE program. The cafes help bridge the gap between families and ECE programs to create a community of support, and the cafes facilitate connections between families and ECE programs and community organizations, especially as we continue to navigate through the challenges the pandemic has caused. We know that ECE program relationships with families throughout the pandemic were really hindered, and communication, we all know, was extremely difficult. So we see the cafes as a great approach and opportunity to re-engage with families and to help with that process. Through Better Together, 5 cafe sessions were developed by Curricula Concepts, and the topics of these sessions include building hope and resilience together. So this is an introductory session to introduce the hope building blocks and the positive experiences framework. We provided this session to participating ECE program staff to help them fully understand the project and the work that we would be doing with the families through the cafes, but it can also be used with families as well. We have a physical activity session named Active Families, Active Children, a session on nutrition, cooking up healthy lifestyles, a session on family style dining called Creating Memories at Mealtime. And then we have a screen time session, Managing Screen Time in a Technology World, which was a very highly requested session by providers and families that were participating. The Better Together family cafes align with the traditional cafe approach to leading conversations with families. So you have a cafe facilitator that's responsible for organizing and leading the cafe. And this includes really working to create an open and welcoming atmosphere where families feel comfortable sharing. And then you have table hosts that are responsible for guiding the small group conversations. And then the whole approach aims to encourage everyone's contributions to the discussions and to help participants know that their ideas and their thoughts matter and that they're truly valued in the conversation. Each cafe takes around 90 minutes to deliver as is, and they can be implemented either in person or virtually. The structure for each cafe session is similar and includes a time for introductions, of course, an overview of the hope building blocks, since the hope building blocks are incorporated into each one of the cafes. And Jamie's going to talk about our partnership with Hope and the hope building blocks in a moment. There's an introduction to some of the topic specific content. There's facilitated discussions on the cafe topic where participants break out into small groups to have more intimate conversations. And we found that this really helps participants to feel more comfortable sharing. And that table host that I mentioned is assigned to each table, or a breakout room if implementing virtually, to help guide the conversations at the tables. And then there's also a time at the end for participants to reflect on the things that they've learned and to have a traditional harvest. And if you don't know what a harvest is, it's really a time where participants are really encouraged to share their ideas and their thoughts with the larger group whenever the larger group has come back together. There's also a participant activity at the end where each of the participants write themselves a letter that will be delivered to them at a later date. For in-person sessions, that's literally writing themselves a letter, and then the facilitator mails it out about 2 weeks later to the participants. And for virtual, we have a program that we use called futureme.org, or a website, futureme.org, where we ask the participants to go in and write themselves a letter. They could choose at what point they want the letter to be emailed to them. And so really we want them to reflect on and to write themselves a letter and any types of commitments to any activities that they've decided they want to try out at home. So I'm going to invite Jamie now to share about the integration of the Hope building blocks into the cafes and some of the great outcomes of the pilot.
Thanks, Khaleesi. So we were certainly, honored to be part of the innovation project. We have been doing cafes here in Arkansas for 8 or 9 years now. Our team's been leading those, so we have a lot of experience, and it's probably my favorite model by which to engage families. They are so powerful. Every time we do them, we hear things like, people feel like they've been in therapy for an hour, and just that experience of being able to connect socially with others who are going through some of the same things at the same time in life has been really powerful. And in addition to that, we think that having staff from early care and education programs included in those cafes really helps to build those connections as well, just in ways that are really hard to do at pick up and drop off time. So cafes have been an integral part of our work for a long time. So we were really excited to get to take that Better Together content and just re-envision how that would look like for families to be able to learn some of that same information and then have the chance to share with each other and talk about their own experiences. We go into every cafe with the idea that everyone's an expert in their own experiences, and really, I think that's what people like is to just be heard. That's what most humans like. They just want someone to hear them and listen, and so that's what cafes are all about. It was very exciting for us to get to partner with the HOPE team, so Dr. Bob and Dina and his team at Tufts, and to be able to really infuse these HOPE building blocks into our cafes. They really challenged us to think about how we framed our cafe questions and to really come from a place of, assuming that there were lots of strengths already in place with families and with the way that they do the things that we were going to be talking about. So they challenged us in that way. Our team grew leaps and bounds by working with them. They're wonderful. So if you're not familiar with the HOPE building blocks, I think of them sort of as the antidote to ACEs. So the HOPE building blocks are these 4 blocks that you see on your screen. It's a little hard to read, so I'll share just a little bit about each one. But what we were challenged to do was to infuse these 4 areas into the cafe topics that we were developing. And these positive experiences are what we know help children grow into resilient, healthy adults, as Calistia has said a couple times, and really help lessen the effects of adversity. So what are the positive experiences that children need to be able to overcome adversity, and what can we do to really evolve our understanding and support of those experiences? And so these 4 building blocks fit beautifully with the whole structure and look of a cafe anyway. So it was not totally difficult to do, but made us be really intentional about our thinking when we were developing. So relationships, of course, which is at the core of everything we do, and is certainly at the core of cafes, but relationships with other children and with adults through activities like cafes. And the 4 building blocks really are focused on children and what they need. The environment, do children have a safe place to live and learn and play? Engagement, are there ways and approaches for them to feel that sense of belonging, connectedness? And then the 4th one is emotional growth, and that's really about, and what it says there, playing and interacting with peers for self-awareness and self-regulation. So we kept all of these in mind as we worked with the HOPE team to develop out the each of the cafes that we did. I do want to comment before Calistia moves to the next slide that this was in the midst of the pandemic when we were developing these. In spring of 21 is when late spring of 21 is when we were ready to launch. So we did do, I think 95% of these cafes that we piloted were virtual. I think we may have gotten one in person, and it is different doing them virtually. I like to believe that my team has figured out a way to make them really effective when we have to do them that way. Of course, being in person and being able to share space, that physical space with somebody, is always ideal, I think. But we have figured out and hopefully written well for you all that are going to use the materials, ways to do it virtually so it's just as impactful. Calistia, if you want to move to the next screen. So you can see here some of our numbers that show how the pilot project went. So we did have 33 programs. You can see our number of sessions that we offered there. Again, just to point out here the importance of staff participating. A lot of times a lesson that we've learned, our team has learned, is sometimes because cafes are such a new concept in early care and education, we often will, when we're working with a new center or site, do a cafe for staff first, just so they can get a feel for, get a sort of a taste of what a cafe looks like, feels like, and then they're better able then to talk to their families and encourage them to attend based on their own experience with a cafe. We also like for staff to participate in the cafes with families when they can, because that just helps to build that positive social connection. So I wanted to point that out there. You can see that in the numbers, how many family members and staff we had. You can see again there that the majority were virtual. And then our results there around our evaluation were very high, and our evaluators that worked on it were really pleased with the results of those evals. I wanted to point out that Net Promoter Score. So the Net Promoter Score assesses how likely it is that someone would recommend the cafes to another colleague or someone else who might be interested. And across the 4 cafes that we conducted is where the score of 82 comes from. So a high percent of participants would promote participation in the cafes. The highest one, and Khaleesi mentioned this earlier, the highest Net Promoter Score was 89, and that was for the Screen Time Cafe. And I know you all who work with families and work with the early care and ed workforce probably understand that being a high score. We get lots and lots of requests for information about how to better understand how to work with technology. It's here, so we've got to figure that out. So that's always, folks are always just really hungry for that information. Then we wanted to note there that participants rated the opportunities to connect with others as most useful. And, as I said, we were in the midst of the pandemic, so I know that was important when folks were feeling really isolated. But I will have to say, in my 8 or 9 years of doing this, that has always been what folks find the most useful. Is oftentimes families of very young children, as we know, because they're so busy and have their own things going, they do feel very isolated, and these cafes allow them a time to come together and connect with others. We listed, this is just one example of some data on one of the cafes, the Cooking Up Healthy Lifestyles Cafe. You can, of course, see the numbers there. The Net Promoter Score for that particular one was 87, so pretty high again, that folks would recommend that. This particular cafe is just give you an idea of sort of what we're talking about. So we do go in as a facilitator, not necessarily an instructor when we do cafes, but we do share. I always say we're not teaching new skills, although we do sort of indirectly in our conversations. We do start the cafe with some content, if you will. So for this one, for example, we talk about considerations for planning healthy meals. We talk about the adult responsibilities versus the child responsibilities in feeding. We talk about phrases that hinder and help when it comes to healthy lifestyles. And then we really get into those questions that promote conversation around the topic. So it is a nice balance of, I think, of sharing new information while building those connections that are so important, and allowing the family members that are there to talk. And again, to be the expert of their own experiences, share what works well, and share what they may need more ideas around. So this is just one example. We were really excited about this data. And then lastly for me, I'll introduce to you, this is a video that we were able to produce highlighting one of our participants. And so I'll let you hear from Debbie Combs. She's a owner of a family childcare home and participated in our Better Together Learning Collaborative, as well as our cafes. And you'll get to meet Robbie Ballou, who is our Better Together lead here in Arkansas.
My name is Debbie Combs. I'm from Heber Springs, Arkansas, and I am the owner and operator of Little Lighthouse Educare pre-K, and I have been doing business here for 17 years.
Miss Debbie is involved in our learning collaborative piece of Better Together, as well as participating in our Better Together family cafes.
So our parent cafes began with Miss Robbie welcoming us and sharing information.
All right, everybody, welcome to our Better Together Family Cafe, managing screen time in a technology.
The Better Together parent cafes have been amazing. We have done nutrition, physical activity, and then my all-time favorite part was family style dining. And family style dining has revolutionized and changed how we do things here. I've always been present with the kids when they eat, but when I sat down at the table with them, our whole day changed.
Definitely my brothers and my mom.
We have those conversations. We laugh, we joke, we cut up. There's times that it's a serious conversation because somebody's sad.
With the first cafe, we definitely have hesitancy of like, what is a cafe? Why is my provider asking me to come to this family meeting?
After they got into the cafes, they have loved them. And as a matter of fact, it was bittersweet when we did our last one a week ago. They asked for more.
It's not a training, and I think that that's what a lot of families have the notion, like, oh, I'm going to go sit through this big long training and all this education, but it's really more so a conversation.
Something as simple as talking to the other parents through these meetings. That's something that we weren't able to do because of the COVID and all that. So it was nice to actually get to know them.
There was a lot of good information that came across, and it really allowed me to kind of take a step back and see how I handle different situations on a day-to-day basis.
Some of the fears that you might have are that it's very time consuming. It is not time consuming. The information that you get is amazing. The support that you get from your TA is out of this world. If you have a problem, shoot them an email, shoot them a text, and they're right there to support you.
Some people have children in their center for 12 hours a day, so they truly are an expert on the children that they serve. They know what they like, what they don't like, and sometimes they are the biggest beacon of education for families.
You can't help but fall in love with them. You can't help but fall in love with the families. It's my heart, if you can't tell.
So Miss Debbie's pretty wonderful, as you can see there, and her families just enjoyed the cafe so much. I wanted to share with you some of the feedback that we've gotten from participants. Remembering that these are, most of these were virtual, but they shared that they learned new ideas that they can do at home, and things that the middle one there reinforce being aware of spending too much time distracted or on their phone or whatever that might be. And we really do talk about, just that 5 minutes of being present with your child, no matter what it is, what activity that you're doing. But really great feedback. And again, what we always hear is just, gosh, I needed this time to be with other people who understand, where I am in my life and with my kiddos. And it's been so nice for the providers, the owners, the directors, the teachers, who are always so well-intentioned. I like to say, I know when I was a teacher and the director, I was very well-intentioned about what I thought my parents needed to know. But these conversations allow them to then actually understand and hear what parents need more of. Families, I'll say families. We've had moms, dads, grandparents, aunts, uncles, foster parents, great grandmothers, you name it, attend cafes. And it allows them to walk away feeling more connected, and it allows the early childhood staff to walk away with, now that I've had this conversation that was very meaningful, now I know what resources they really need or what additional training might be helpful, rather than trying to guess. So that was our experience. I could talk about cafes for a really long time. So if anybody wants more information, I think my email address is at the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to have a side conversation at any time about our experience here.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I remember as we were going through the cafes last spring, last winter, 2022, I was always so encouraged and inspired to hear the stories that you all would share about how the families and the childcare providers were impacted by the cafes that you all implemented. So thank you so much for sharing a little piece of that today. I know it's only a small sliver of the impact that you all made through the cafes. So let's walk through the resources that are available to guide the planning and implementation of the Better Together Family Cafe sessions. So we have firstly, the Family Cafes Toolkit. So this document is around 20 pages long and it's divided into 2 sections. So we have a planning and an implementation section. In this document, we tried to offer as many ideas and factors for you to consider as we could think of, but we understand that each facilitator or coordinator's reality and resources are different. So we've tried to present all of the information in a way knowing that every facilitator will need to adjust and modify the plan, modify the cafes to incorporate their available resources and to meet the needs of their audiences, the parents that they're working with, their childcare providers or other community organizations that they're working with. So we tried really hard to make all of the materials to be as adaptable and as flexible as possible. Each one, so the Family Cafe Toolkit actually has planning and implementation checklists. And at the end of each one of the sections, the checklist is there just to help guide and navigate any facilitators, any project coordinators that want to implement the cafes to really think through each piece and each one of the factors that you should really be considering as you're going through planning and implementing the family cafes. So this is the planning checklist and the implementation checklist. And then one of the key components, and one of the things that whenever we develop any types of materials, we want to provide actual PowerPoint presentations with detailed notes. So we have PowerPoint presentations for each one of the cafe sessions that walks the facilitator through each step of hosting the cafe. So there's no question on what comes next. You have all of the notes and everything that you need to really walk through that guided conversation with the participants that you're working with. And this is just an example of one of the PowerPoints that we have, and then also the copy of the slide, and then the way that we've listed out all of the notes. So we tried to make it as easy as possible to implement the cafes. Also, Curricula Concepts developed some really great handouts that can be shared with participants. They can be shared virtually or printed for in-person. Each handout has some relevant resources that families can check out to gain more information about the topic. There are links that you can click on, and then also we provided QR codes that a participant can use to access the materials online. So how do you access the materials? So the Family Cafe Toolkit that I mentioned actually has a page at the very beginning of the toolkit with links where you can download each one of the resources. That way, that makes it really easy. I think it's like page 2 or 3 of the toolkit. It's right there. Everything's at your fingertips. You can download it and begin to look through and use everything that way. Also, we have a web page on the healthykidshealthyfuture.org page for Better Together Family Cafes. If you navigate to that page, just like with Nourishing Healthy Eaters, if you complete the information in the really brief form on the right side of the page, then you can press submit. And then a page will come up where you can click the button for materials. And then a page will appear where you can download all of the materials and resources. So you just click on the accordions, and each one of the accordions has all of the resources listed underneath there. This is a hidden page on the website, and you can access the resources. You can actually bookmark this page so that you can have access, later on. So you don't have to keep entering in the information in the form every time. And I believe Hannah put the link to that webpage in the chat box. So we'd like to share some ideas also for how you can use these materials and some brief thoughts on factors to consider. So we thought through, and there are many, many different things that we could share, but we thought that we would share just a couple of bullet points here. So like I mentioned before, ECE programs can use the materials themselves to engage their families, or if you work with a community organization, You can implement the family cafes in collaboration with an ECE program, or you can use the materials to support families in your area independently and not in collaboration with the childcare program. So we tried to make it as flexible as possible so that you can use them with a variety of different audiences and of families of young children. A few ideas that we came up with include also to integrate the Better Together Family Cafes into training and technical assistance programs and networks for childcare programs. The Family Cafe sessions can really be a great resource for ECE program staff, just to dive into these topics and to help facilitate those types of discussions amongst the staff. Of course, you can use the Family Cafes to support ECE programs in their efforts to engage families as well. I've personally used Family Cafes in the past with Head Start programs with their family engagement piece, and I thought that was a really great way to work with families in Head Start programs. You can also partner with a variety of community partners, such as libraries or family resource centers, Head Start programs to offer the cafes to families. And then you can feel free to modify the materials to reach a variety of different audiences. And I thought I'd ask Jamie if you don't mind sharing some of the ways that Curricula Concepts has used cafes to support families and the different groups that you've worked with in the past.
Sure. I mean, just in general, you know, I would say the majority of our experience is with early care and education, is with our partnerships with early care and education providers. But we have used cafes with teen parent groups. We have, you know, promoted them just sort of open to the public and had parents attend in that age group, parents of children in the early childhood years. Although I would say the questions are broad enough that they could, you know, it doesn't have to just be birth to 5. It could, you know, go. We often have parents of children who are a little bit older. You just have to think about then the resources that you're going to provide to make sure that they're applicable. If you have safe baby support teams in your communities, the Project Through 0 to 3, we've worked with those families and provided cafes for them. So it's, I mean, we've worked with women's shelters. The cafes are just such a powerful tool. Any work you're doing to engage families in meaningful ways, to me, the cafe model is very effective.
Thanks, Jamie. On the right side here, you can see a list of just a couple of considerations when planning a family cafe. We've outlined a lot of these things in the cafe toolkit and many other topics that you can think through as you're planning and implementing the cafes. But we think that you can start by asking yourself, you know, what existing community partnerships do you have to support recruitment and implementation of a family cafe? We definitely recommend building on partnerships that you already have in place to reach families in your community and your area. Then another thought would be, will you deliver the sessions in person or will you be delivering them virtually? If delivering in person, there are a lot of different factors and expenses that you might need to consider. First of all would be the meeting location. And if you're offering the cafes with an ECE program, we definitely recommend hosting the cafe on site at the childcare program. And this really helps to alleviate any kinds of challenges families might face due to travel or parking if it's held in a different location. Also, we recommend offering childcare services during the cafe if held in person to help participants to fully focus on the conversations, because I know personally myself, I have 2 kids, and if I'm trying to focus on a conversation while they're over running around, throwing things and playing, it can be really difficult, and I'm sure you all understand. So that's a key component of an in-person cafe, is to be able to provide childcare services during the cafe so that the parents and the families can really focus on the conversation at hand. If in person, we also recommend offering small snacks or a meal depending on the time of day. If in person at a childcare program, we suggest planning the cafes during the time when the families are already present. So maybe during a drop-off, like a breakfast cafe or a pickup time, to have just right at the time of pickup, just to decrease the number of trips that a family has to make to your program. If you aren't offering an in-person cafe in connection with the ECE program, we definitely recommend choosing a location that's easily accessible to public transportation or has convenient parking, such as a library or some other organization or program that is families go to pretty often. You can consider working with an ECE program to offer childcare services on site at the meeting location. I've actually done that before, where I've helped coordinate childcare services at a previous job, so families can fully participate in the cafe sessions. So we hosted the cafes at a library. I worked with and contracted with a childcare program to provide a couple of staff members to come and to take care of the children, and to provide different types of nutrition and physical activity activities with the children while the family members were participating in the cafe. Another consideration is the resources and time that might be needed to train the technical assistance providers or the coaches that are facilitating the family cafes. The cafes were developed in a way that walks any trainer or coach through the full process to host a family cafe, but you might want your staff to have a bit more training on the cafe model and the hope building blocks. And we're extremely fortunate to partner with Curricula Concepts, whose staff was already very knowledgeable about the cafe model and had extensive experience delivering the cafes. But there are a lot of resources online and even trainings available to help provide additional guidance. I know that the Hope National Resource Center at Tufts Medical Center has some great trainings on the 4 building blocks of hope. And there are several options to train on the cafe approach as well, such as the 0 to 3 Carrying Conversations cafe model. So those are all different resources that you could utilize to help prepare, but they are not necessarily required to utilize this toolkit for family cafes. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is incentives. It's always very helpful to offer some type of incentive to encourage participation of families. You could offer a monetary incentive through providing a gift card for participation, or maybe a travel reimbursement to help families to get there. Or you can offer door prizes or other types of materials that are relevant to the family cafe. So an idea for physical activity that I thought of would be that you could work with a local Zumba instructor or some other business to offer a voucher to join a fitness class for free or something like that. Jamie, any other ideas that you'd like to share?
I think you covered the main things. I know in the documents that we developed, we tried to think of every consideration and give ideas for those. So as folks get into those, if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out. We've worked through I'm not going to say every scenario, because there's always a new scenario that pops up, but lots and lots of different scenarios. So we I think we could help if something comes up.
Awesome, thank you. And I saw there was some activity in the chat. Did we answer all the questions? Are there any questions that we need to address?
I think I got them. I did want to mention we've had a lot of experience with home visiting programs. That was the one I left out. We've actually done a lot of cafes for home visiting programs. That works really beautifully with their model. And then just the idea that the cafes really were developed to be standalone. So you can do one if that's what a program has time for, or if they say, no, we really want to do the whole series, that's great too. So very flexible in that sense.
Awesome, thank you. And if you don't mind going ahead and dropping the feedback form link into the chat, that would be great. And are there any other questions? Anyone want to unmute and ask any questions about Nourishing Healthy Eaters or the family cafes? All right, so lastly, we'd like to share that Nemours Kids Health, the Nemours Kids Health website has been rebranded, and the new website is actually going to launch tomorrow on April the 5th. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the Kids Health website, which was founded at Nemours Children's Health in 1995. KidsHealth.org has been a big part of our efforts to create a healthier future for all kids, and Kids Health is now the #1 most trusted source for physician-reviewed information on children's health on the web. So we're very proud of that. The new look and the colors now align more closely with the new Nemours branding and vision, which was launched about 1.5 years ago. And so we just wanted to tease that and hope that you all will check out the Nemours Kids Health website. And that concludes our resource showcase for today. Thank you all again for joining us, and we hope that you have a great remainder of your week. Thank you so much.